There are men who inherit kingdoms. There are men who conquer kingdoms. And then, very rarely, there is a man who seems to believe that the boundaries of the world itself are not large enough for his ambition. His name was Alexander. He was only 20 years old when he became king of Macedon. In barely 12 years, his armies marched from Greece to Egypt, across Persia, through Central Asia, and as far east as India. He had defeated armies larger than his own. He had crossed deserts and mountains. He had founded cities that carried his name. He had stood before kings and made them kneel. But if we reduce Alexander to a conqueror, we miss the more fascinating question. What made Alexander great? Was it his army, his intelligence, his courage, his education, his ambition? Or was there something deeper within him, a way of seeing himself and the world that made extraordinary achievements possible? Perhaps the answer lies not in the empire he conquered, but in the mind of the young man who believed it could be conquered. Alexander was born in 356 BC in Pella, the capital of Macedon. His father was Philip II, the architect of Macedon's military power. But Alexander was shaped by another force as well, his mother, Olympias. She was a princess of Epirus, a woman of powerful personality and intense religious convictions. Alexander grew up surrounded by stories of gods, heroes, ancestry, and destiny. And then came another influence who would shape his mind, Aristotle. For several years, Aristotle taught Alexander and other sons of Macedonian nobles at Maesa. There, Alexander encountered literature, philosophy, science, medicine, and the intellectual traditions of Greece. His education was not merely preparation for a throne. It was an education in how to understand the world. And perhaps nothing shaped his imagination more deeply than Homer. Alexander became devoted to the Iliad, and especially to Achilles. Achilles offered him a model of greatness, a life that might be short, but would burn so brightly that its memory would outlive generations. Alexander did not merely want to live. He wanted his life to mean something. He wanted to leave behind a name that time itself would struggle to erase. In 336 BC, Philip II was assassinated. Alexander became king. He was 20 years old. At an age when most people are still discovering who they are, Alexander inherited a kingdom and immediately had to prove that he was worthy of ruling it. Revolts erupted. Enemies tested him. Thebes rebelled against Macedonian authority. Alexander responded with devastating speed. The city was destroyed, a warning to every other Greek state that the young king was not weak. Then he turned toward the greatest prize in the known world, the Persian Empire. In 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia. Persia possessed enormous wealth, territory, and resources. Alexander possessed something different, an extraordinary conviction that victory was possible. At the Granicus, Issus, and finally Gaugamela, he repeatedly defeated Persian forces. Darius III fled. Babylon opened its gates. Susa fell. Persepolis was captured. And the young Macedonian king was no longer merely a conqueror from the west. He was becoming ruler of an empire that belonged to another civilization. But this is where Alexander becomes more interesting than the simple image of a warrior, because he gradually understood a fundamental truth. Conquering a people is not the same as ruling them. Alexander retained Persian administrators. He incorporated local elites into his government. He adopted elements of Persian royal dress and ceremony. He married Roxana, a Bactrian noblewoman. And later, at Susa, he and many of his companions married women from Persian and Iranian noble families. Thousands of Macedonian soldiers who had married Asian women were also honored with gifts. The symbolism was enormous. Alexander was no longer imagining an empire held together by Macedonian swords alone. He was attempting to create a political world in which different peoples could exist beneath one imperial order, not simply Macedonian against Persian, not Greek against Asian, but something larger. Yet we should not romanticize him. Alexander was not a modern advocate of equality. His policies were also practical. He needed Persian administrators. He needed Persian soldiers. He needed cooperation across an empire too vast for Macedonians alone to govern, and his policies created fierce resistance among some of his own men. At Opis, Macedonian soldiers rebelled when Persian troops were increasingly incorporated into the army and given positions of honor. Alexander's dream of unity, therefore, contained a deep contradiction. The conqueror was being transformed by the civilization he had conquered. He was conquering Persia, and Persia was, in another sense, conquering him. But there was another force within Alexander that may explain his relentless advance. The Greeks had a word for it: pothos, a longing, a yearning for something distant. Alexander seemed unable to accept the horizon as the end. Persia was not enough. Egypt was not enough. Central Asia was not enough.
Beyond every mountain, there was another mountain. Beyond every river, another river. Beyond every victory, another possibility. His armies eventually reached the Hyphasis River in India. And there, Alexander encountered a boundary that could not simply be overcome by personal will. His soldiers refused to go farther. They were exhausted. They had been campaigning for years. They wanted homes.
Alexander wanted the horizon. His men wanted to return. Eventually, he yielded. It was one of the few boundaries in his life he could not command away. He had conquered enormous territories, but he could not conquer the limits of the human beings who followed him. And Alexander was not fearless. That distinction matters. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that something else matters more. Alexander repeatedly placed himself where death was a real possibility. He fought from the front. He was wounded many times. His soldiers saw him sharing their danger, rather than commanding safely from behind. And perhaps this was one of the oldest secrets of his leadership. People will endure extraordinary suffering for a leader who appears willing to endure it beside them. Alexander shared their exhaustion, their wounds, their victories. For much of his career, his soldiers followed him not simply because he was king, but because they believed in the man walking before them. But greatness has a shadow. The qualities that elevate a person above others can eventually become the forces that destroy him. Ambition can become obsession. Confidence can become arrogance. Courage can become recklessness. Leadership can become domination. Alexander increasingly adopted Persian customs, but some of his Macedonian companions saw this as a betrayal of their traditions. His vision had begun to outgrow the world from which he had come. He had inherited a Macedonian kingdom. He had conquered a Persian empire. And now he was attempting to create something neither Macedonia nor Persia had previously been. Whether that vision could have survived, we can never know. History did not give him enough time. In 323 BC, Alexander returned to Babylon. He was 32 years old. He had spent most of his adult life campaigning. And then, suddenly, the story stopped. Alexander became seriously ill. The exact cause of his death remains uncertain, but the result is certain. He died in Babylon in June 323 BC, 32 years old. The man who had crossed continents could not cross the distance between one illness and death. The conqueror of empires could not conquer his own mortality. After his death, his empire fractured. His generals fought over it. The political world he had created began to divide. And yet, Alexander's name survived. Perhaps this is the final irony. He spent his life trying to outrun the limits of an ordinary human existence. In the end, death reminded him, and everyone after him, that no human being escapes the final boundary. So what made Alexander great? Not that he was perfect. He was not. Not simply that he was a brilliant warrior. He inherited an extraordinary military machine from Philip II, and commanded soldiers who had been trained to fight as few armies in history had been trained before them. Not simply that he was ambitious. Ambition alone can make a person destructive rather than great. Perhaps Alexander's greatness came from a rare combination: imagination, courage, education, ambition, and an almost unbearable refusal to accept the limits of what seemed possible. Aristotle gave the young prince a world of ideas. Olympias gave him a powerful sense of identity and destiny. Philip gave him a kingdom and an army. But Alexander transformed what he inherited. He took a Macedonian kingdom and carried it to the edge of the known world. He defeated Persia and then attempted to incorporate Persians into the empire he had taken from them. He dreamed of glory and discovered that even glory could not defeat death. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of Alexander. Greatness is not simply the ability to conquer more. It is the ability to become more than what you were given. A man can inherit an empire and waste it. A man can command thousands and still fail to command himself. A man can become famous and still live an insignificant life. Alexander did something different. He inherited possibility and expanded it beyond what anyone around him thought possible. He crossed mountains. He defeated armies. He founded cities. He brought distant peoples into contact with one another. He changed the political and cultural history of the ancient world. And yet, for all his victories, his greatest conquest remained unfinished. He never found the end of the world. He found something else, the limit of a human life. And perhaps that is why, more than 2,000 years later, we still speak his name. Not because he conquered everything. He did not. But because he spent his short life asking how far a human being could go. And perhaps the question Alexander leaves behind is not, how much of the world can you conquer? It is something more difficult. What are you capable of becoming before your own time runs out?